What happens when a divorced, down-on-his-luck author picks up a shivering stray cat during the worst night of his life and wakes up the next morning to find a beautiful woman with cat ears and a tail curled up next to him in bed? She doesn't want to leave. She wants him to raise her. And the worst part? He's allergic to cats. This is Make Me Purr, and trust me, it only gets crazier from here. Nothing was going right for Kwon Ji-pil, the kind of night where the rain doesn't just fall on you, it targets you. He was wandering the streets in a complete haze, soaked through like a man who'd already given up on finding shelter. Life had decided to pile it all on at once, and tonight was the breaking point. While he was dragging himself through the downpour, a sound cut through the rain. A small, desperate meow. A cat, shivering in a box on the side of the road, soaked and pitiful. Ji-pil wasn't thinking straight, and maybe that's exactly why he stopped. He looked at the trembling little thing with its wide purple eyes and muttered something about it being pretty. And yeah, that was all it took. He really must be out of his mind. That's what he told himself as he scooped up a stray cat in the middle of a rainstorm while barely holding his own life together. Also worth mentioning, he was recently divorced, the kind of detail that explains a lot about a man talking to a cat in an alley at midnight. His phone buzzed with a friend checking in, telling him he was way too drunk and to just get home safe. Ji-pil told him to stop nagging 5 times already, but his buddy wasn't buying it. The concern was real, even if Ji-pil kept brushing it off. His friend's voice crackled through the phone like a worried parent who'd already lost patience. The guy on the other end wasn't letting up, asking if he went into a convenience store, begging him to say he's just getting water. Kwon Ji-pil was a great guy with no particular red flags, just a few quirky traits. One of which was his personality. He grabbed a green bottle off the shelf and called it mineral water, and honestly, even he didn't sound convinced. The cashier asked for his ID, and Ji-pil looked genuinely offended. Who needs an ID to buy water? His friend on the phone groaned, calling his nagging worse than his ex-wife's. Ji-pil told him to knock it off, but there was something almost comforting about someone caring that much. He jingled out of the store with his water and zero intention of going straight home. This is what went down the night before. The backstory nobody asked for, but everyone needed. Ji-pil was born with all the bad luck in the world, the kind of guy pigeons specifically choose to torment. Speaking of which, he woke up to an entire bird orchestra outside his window. Sparrows chirping, pigeons cooing, a full concert he never bought tickets to. He lay there with a pounding headache, cursing the birds and swearing he needed to move. Every coo felt like a hammer to his skull, and the sunlight wasn't doing him any favors either. Then his hand brushed against something warm next to him in bed, something that definitely wasn't there when he passed out. He felt something soft. A tail? Ears? His brain was still booting up, and nothing was making sense yet. He thought maybe he was dreaming, some kind of vivid fever dream his hungover brain cooked up. But the warmth was real, pressed right up against him, and it was purring. Whatever this was, it had made itself very comfortable in his bed. It was exactly these kinds of things that made him unlucky. Waking up to mysteries he couldn't explain. The morning light revealed a girl with white hair and what looked like cat ears sound asleep next to him. Ji-pil's first coherent thought of the day, wondering if she was a minor. The narration assures us she's not. He sat there on the edge of the bed, trying to process what he was seeing. His second thought was slightly more practical. Is this a cosplayer? In his house? How does someone even sleep with those things on their head? He reached over and grabbed one of the ears, giving it a solid yank to pull off what he assumed was a headband. The scream that followed could be heard from the rooftop. It was real. The ears were real, and he'd just nearly ripped one off a stranger's head. She went flying off the bed in pain while Ji-pil stood there looking like a man who'd just made first contact with an alien species and immediately chose violence. She introduced herself. Or rather, the situation introduced her. Yang Myohyun, cat person, age unknown. Probably a Norwegian forest cat, if anyone's keeping track. She clutched her ear and yelled at him for almost tearing it off. Tail puffed up in fury, Ji-pil sat on his couch with his arms crossed, looking like the one being interrogated despite being in his own apartment. He asked the obvious question, why does it look like he's the one getting scolded right now? Because you're suspicious, she shot back without hesitation. The audacity was remarkable for someone who'd broken into a stranger's home. Ji-pil stared at her, then stared some more, trying to decide if this was still the hangover talking. He told her to stop dodging and start explaining. He was too flustered to be sure, but he definitely didn't meet any women last night. Who are you and how did you get in here? Myohyun's face fell, her big eyes going wide with hurt. You don't remember? The silence that followed was louder than any answer. But everyone comes with a story of their own, and that was true for this cat too. Young Myohyun wasn't always a stray. She was fortunate enough to be born into a rich family. Young, pampered, and completely sheltered from anything resembling hardship. She survived her childhood illness as a story her family made their own, wrapping her in love and protection. Myo-hyun was treated with nothing but love since birth, which sounds great until you realize what it actually means. She had never met a single human who was hostile to her, not one. Her survival instinct was basically non-existent, like a house cat who's never seen the outdoors, so it was no wonder that when fate dropped her into Kwon Jipul's life, she didn't even flinch. That's why when things like this happened, things like waking up tangled with a stranger, she just let it slide. She'd curl up next to him in cat form, purring away, radiating warmth like a space heater with a heartbeat. Jipul would toss and turn, wondering why his apartment felt like a sauna. The answer was literally clinging to him under the blankets. They did it a lot more after that. The accidental closeness, the blurred lines, the mornings that needed explaining. Myo-hyun was also out of it, so she let things slide that probably shouldn't have been slid. But this shabby, unlucky, recently divorced man had crossed a line neither of them fully understood yet. She sat on the edge of the bed, wearing his oversized shirt, looking dazed, while he trembled, reaching for his clothes. The morning after carried a weight neither of them was ready for. He didn't recognize her at first. This wasn't the shivering cat from the rainstorm. She was something else entirely now, and the gravity of what happened was sinking in fast. Jipul lay there staring at the ceiling while Myo-hyun's purple eyes watched him with an expression that was impossible to read, somewhere between confused, hurt, and dangerously trusting. Jipul told her to cut the bullshit. He didn't want to believe it, but he remembered what happened between them. Myo-hyun insisted she wasn't lying, that she was just asleep when he... And she couldn't even finish the sentence. The tension between them was suffocating. Both of them sitting on opposite ends of the couch like two people who'd crossed a line. Neither knew how to uncross. Her tail flickered nervously behind her, while his jaw stayed clenched. She swallowed her pride and made her demand. He was going to have to take responsibility and raise her here. Jipul's answer came fast and flat. Denied. He hit her with the 1-2 punch. He's allergic to cats. And also, he's not kidding. She literally cannot stay here. Myo-hyun sprang off the couch in protest, yelling that he said she could tell him what she wanted, but Jipul shut that down too. Make reasonable requests. She wasn't giving up that easy though. Jipul handed her a cup of coffee and told her plain, he doesn't have a knack for raising anything. Nothing he ever did ended well, and Myo-hyun's internal narration clocked it immediately, spoken like a true divorcee. He told her she could leave after finishing her coffee, tail swishing with finality. The dismissal hung in the air like a door already half closed. Then Myo-hyun snapped. She screamed at him to wait, calling him a bastard, tears welling up in those big purple eyes. Why can't you just raise me? The words came out like a desperate plea from someone who'd never once been told no in her entire life. Jipul stared at her, clearly not expecting the emotional nuke she just dropped. The raw vulnerability on her face was enough to make anyone flinch. The doorbell rang. Lee Hen-yong, Jipul's old friend, the one who nagged worse than his ex-wife on the phone, was standing outside with hangover medicine and zero patience. He'd been worried Jipul had literally died in the street, and when no one answered the bell, he started panicking. This prick, he muttered, staring at the silent door and wondering if he should call someone. He started hammering on the door, slam after slam after slam, shouting for Jipul to come out, asking if he was all right in there. Inside the apartment, Jipul and Myo-hyun froze, staring at each other in mutual panic. The Catgirl with her ears out and her tail up was not exactly guest-ready. Jipul's face said everything. This was about to become a much bigger problem than a hangover. The door finally cracked open, and Jipul emerged looking like death warmed over, growling enough through gritted teeth. Hen-yong's relief instantly turned to suspicion. Why didn't you open the door sooner? Jipul muttered he wasn't going to open it at all, which only made things worse. Hen-yong stepped inside uninvited and immediately noticed something off. Why are there 2 cups here? He asked if someone had been over. The director? A guest? Jipul deflected, but everything went south the second Hen-yong ran his mouth. Yeah, Jipul admitted internally. Everything fell apart as soon as he opened his mouth to Hen-yong. The friend was already poking around the apartment, detective mode fully activated, and the evidence was piling up fast. Jipul caved. Fine. She can stay here, but under one condition. They were going to write a roommate agreement, a full-on contract, because boundaries clearly needed to exist. Rule 1. She had to stay in her cat form as much as possible. Myo-hyun stared at the notebook like she was being handed a prison sentence wrapped in sticky notes. Rule 3. Maintain a routine lifestyle within reason, and if possible, find a part-time job. Do not be a freeloader. Myo-hyun looked at the phone showing 2:42 a.m. and wondered if he was insane. The narration confirmed what we already suspected. Failed. She'd already broken every rule before the ink was dry, and Jipple's patience was leveling up to superhuman status. Henyoung, meanwhile, had been completely won over by Myohyun in cat form. He was on the floor snapping photos from every angle, calling her gorgeous, a total princess, showering her with generic cat praises. Jipple stood there dead-eyed while his friend lost his entire mind over a fluffy white cat. The irony of the situation was not lost on anyone except Henyoung. He kept scrolling through the photos, gushing about her coat and demanding to know her name. Jipple answered reluctantly, Hyun, and Henyoung didn't even question why a man who just got divorced already named his cat. The audacity of this fluffy little creature sitting there looking regal, while Jipple's life crumbled around her, was almost poetic. She really was pretty though, even he had to admit that. Henyoung called him an irresponsible bastard for taking in a cat only days after his divorce, but then softened, said that all things aside, this was probably good for him. He petted Myohyun gently and told Jipple this meant he had a family again. The words landed heavier than either of them expected, and Jipple went quiet for a beat before admitting, "Yeah, you're right." "Be nice to this one," Henyoung said quietly as he headed for the door. "You shouldn't meet the same end." The weight of that sentence sat between them like a stone, a reminder that Jipple's track record with keeping things alive wasn't great. Henyoung left the hangover cure, told him to stop drinking so much, and asked to hug Hyun one more time before being slammed out the door. Myohyun was having the time of her life in cat form, meowing happily on the couch while Jipple processed the chaos of the last 24 hours. Henyoung's parting words echoed, "Buy her a cat tree and toys, stop drinking." The door slammed shut, and Jipple stood there holding a bottle of hangover medicine, alone again, with a cat person he'd accidentally made a roommate. He dashed back inside before Henyoung could change his mind and come back. The evidence of Myohyun's rule-breaking was everywhere. Books pulled from the study to the bedroom, chip crumbs on the bed, an empty cup abandoned in the wrong room. Jipple spotted her trying to hide the evidence with an innocent "oh," and his eye twitched. He dragged his hand down his face and muttered, "You really need to be taught a lesson." The grin that crept across his face was not a comforting one. He reminded her they never set a punishment for breaking the agreement, and that must be why she was acting like this. Myohyun flinched as the bed creaked under his weight, her tail going rigid. He tapped her gently and asked if she knew why rules are supposed to be kept, because you get punished for breaking them. The room temperature dropped about 10 degrees. Therefore, he announced, he was going to punish her for breaking the rules. What did she think it should be? Myohyun's face went blank with genuine confusion. She'd never been punished in her life. Jipple paused, let out a dry laugh, and muttered what a great life she must have had, to be really loved like that. Then he dragged her closer across the bed. She stuttered that he should have told her this was going to be her punishment, and Myohyun fired back. "Would that have stopped you?" Jipple told her to let him see, but she covered her face and begged him not to look, her eyes already swollen from crying. He announced he was going to spank her 5 times, and she needed to start counting. Myohyun was too shocked to even form words. He told her he'd teach her who the alpha of this house was, and chills ran visibly down Myohyun's spine. Her purple eyes went wide as dinner plates, her whole body frozen in disbelief. He's completely lost it, she thought, and she wasn't wrong. He promised he'd make her cry and beg for forgiveness, and honestly, the cliffhanger couldn't have hit harder. Jipple told her there would always be a punishment for breaking the rules, and asked if it hurt. Myohyun sniffled and admitted yeah, it did, and that's exactly why she needed to keep the rules. He asked if she was going to break them again, and she promised she wouldn't. He checked on her swollen face and muttered he might have overdone it, then softly apologized while she called him mean. But something was stirring in Jipple that he really didn't want to acknowledge. He called himself shameless as Myohyun pressed herself against him, all soft and warm and completely unaware of what she was doing to him. She asked what he was doing, and he couldn't even answer properly. The proximity was becoming a problem, and his body was making that embarrassingly clear. She told him she knew the quickest way to erase the pain. You do something that feels good. The innocence of the delivery versus the weight of the implication hit Jipple like a truck. Things escalated fast after that, louder than either of them intended, the sounds echoing off the apartment walls. The narration confirmed what everyone already suspected. The two of them were surprisingly compatible. The aftermath left Jipple passed out cold in bed. The roommate agreement crumpled beside him with a very important update. The first item on the contract, stay in cat form as much as possible, had been completely erased. That rule was dead, buried, and nobody was attending the funeral. The agreement was becoming more useless by the day, and they both knew it. Myohyun woke up the next morning barely able to move, wobbling toward the bathroom like her legs had forgotten how to work. She mumbled about not being able to wake up properly, dragging herself across the floor. Then she heard the front door click open and froze. The scream that followed, and the splash that hit Jeepel square in the face, confirmed she'd walked in at exactly the wrong moment. Myohyun was told ages ago that a guest would be coming, and Jeepel tried to prep her. Today you really can't come out. She pressed her paws over her ears like a brat, and he had to physically pry them off, hissing at her to behave. But even in cat form, she still hated strangers. The scratching at the washing machine said everything about her mood. The guest turned out to be a woman, and she smelled like perfume. Myohyun's ears flattened and her eyes went dark, watching from behind the furniture like a predator sizing up a rival. Jeepel was cooking, asking the woman if the food was too salty, while she complimented him warmly. Something about this scene didn't sit right with Myohyun, and she could sense it in her whiskers. The woman was surprised to learn Jeepel had a cat. Said she didn't think anything had changed except that. She mentioned it had been so long, and Jeepel corrected her. It's only been a couple of years. She'd read his novel and won an award, and the easy warmth between them was enough to make Myohyun's fur stand on end. Myohyun was eavesdropping hard, and every giggle from that woman was a knife. Turns out Jeepel was an author, a pure literature writer, the old-fashioned kind who believed an author should have a hill to die on. The woman teased him about it, calling him cliché, suggesting he write a romance novel based on his experiences. He shot that down with a shudder, saying people only read genre novels these days. Myohyun's ear twitched from behind the couch. Jeepel the romance novel fanatic, and he didn't even know she'd caught that detail. He admitted he'd been trying to write something new, but it wasn't going well. Maybe writer's block. Myohyun perked up at this, thrilled to finally learn something about the man she lived with. He never talked about himself, and she didn't know anything about him. This woman, whoever she was, had access to parts of Jeepel that Myohyun had never even glimpsed. The woman leaned in to pet Myohyun in cat form, cooing about how cute she was, reaching right into her personal space. Then the cat snapped, knocking something off the table with a shatter that cut through the room. Jeepel's face went dark as Myohyun in cat form sat there looking smug. The cat had caused trouble again, and Jeepel's glare told her to stay put while they cleaned up the mess. Myohyun ran off to a corner, curled up and sulking, wondering why he was so mean to her. But something deeper was gnawing at her. Something doesn't sit right with me, she thought. She could sense something between Jeepel and this woman. Something invisible but heavy. Then she shifted into human form and walked out to where they were sitting, and said hello. Jeepel panicked instantly, his brain short-circuiting at the sight of Myohyun in human form, standing in front of his guest, with her ears barely hidden under a hat. The woman blinked. "May I help you?" And Jeepel scrambled to cover, pressing Myohyun's hat down and stammering an excuse. Animal rights groups, human rights groups. His mind was racing through every possible disaster scenario at once. The woman laughed it off, saying she'd never seen Jeepel move so fast, and the tension broke just enough to breathe. They took Myohyun shopping at a mega mall, Jeepel hissing at her not to take off her hat and not to draw attention. She claimed she'd been in public before, but the second someone tapped her shoulder, she jolted and nearly transformed on the spot. Jeepel caught her mid-poof, shielding her from view while mentally drafting his own obituary. Myohyun was buzzing afterward. She loved the clothes they bought. The lunch was amazing, and it had been so long since she'd been somewhere so crowded. She said she wanted to go back someday, and Jeepel quietly agreed. Me too. She was stunned, reminding him he'd told her to never even dream about it. He grabbed his drink and said something that stopped her cold. He'd learned to be honest while he still can, because some moments don't come back once they leave you. Then he laughed it off. Sorry, that was a bit sudden. I've been divorced, you see. But the damage was done, and Myohyun's face was already flushing. The vulnerability he'd just shown her, even wrapped in a joke, was more than he'd ever given willingly. A single drip of condensation rolled down the cup like a tear, and Myohyun whispered, "Huh?" He opened up about the divorce for real this time. His ex-wife was from a rich family, abandoned everything to marry him. But he was just a high school graduate with nothing to his name, and reality hit hard. She told him she couldn't do it anymore, not because she stopped loving him, but because the life was breaking her. He said he wasn't hung up on her, but he wished he could have done more. Jeepel told Myohyun not to be too surprised. It wasn't that big a deal anymore. He was over regretting and looking back, he said, though the weight in his voice told a different story. He was also sick and tired of things back then. The exhaustion of being not enough for someone who gave up everything. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and real, while Myohyun listened without a word. Back at home, Jeepel sat Myohyun down. "Hey, we need to talk." He asked her why she did all that earlier. why she caused a scene with his guest. She went silent, then mumbled she didn't know, and Jeeple's patience snapped. That's it? That's all the excuse you can give me? He asked if it was because she was half cat, if that's why she couldn't tell what was important to humans, and the words hit her like a slap. Myo-hyun exploded. She didn't want to see that woman anymore. She'd been laughing all day without caring about Myo-hyun one bit. And do you even know how territorial cats are? That woman's perfume practically paralyzed her nose, and she was sneaky, pressing up against Jeeple like she owned him. The jealousy poured out of her in waves, raw and unfiltered, and Jeeple just stood there in shock, watching the confession unravel itself. He pinned her down and stared. Aren't you just being jealous? She thrashed and flailed, screaming it wasn't fair to use his strength like that, before finally cracking. Fine, she admitted it. She was jealous. He asked what else, and she glanced away, asking if it hurt where she scratched him. Yeah, you brat, he said. Do you even know how sharp your claws are? The tension between them shifted from anger to something neither of them was ready to name. Myo-hyun got a part-time job at a cafe and was immediately terrible at it, dropping cups, fumbling orders, nearly sending a customer running. But she apologized with those big purple eyes, and somehow everyone forgave her on the spot. She was just excited to work her first job ever, and it showed. Both of them headed out at the same time. Myo-hyun to work, Jeeple to something he clearly dreaded. She asked where he was going, and he dodged with a vague, I have a thing. Whatever it is, she thought, he doesn't want to go. Jeeple met his ex-wife. She held his hand and told him she was getting married soon. She just wanted him to know she was doing fine now. You should live your life too, she said, and thanked him for everything. The gentleness in her voice was the kind that only comes from someone who loved you and moved on completely. Myo-hyun came dashing out the second his ex left. Are you done? Let's go home. The timing was almost supernatural, like she'd been waiting around the corner. His ex watched them leave, surprised by this white-haired girl dragging Jeeple away by the arm. Jeeple checked his phone, and something cracked inside him. He muttered he must have lost his mind. Otherwise he would have, and couldn't finish the thought. Meanwhile, his ex was already on an escalator, telling someone she'd never forgotten this day. The past wasn't done with either of them. Myo-hyun was out chasing troublemakers at a park, completely oblivious to Jeeple's spiral. He found her breathless and asked where she went. This is strange, he thought. Why am I taking this so hard? Haenyoung spotted them on the street and immediately noticed Myo-hyun's ears were gone. She explained cat people can live in full human form with practice. It's just uncomfortable. Jeeple snapped at her for hiding something this important, and she shrugged it off. Someone asked Jeeple what Myo-hyun was like, and he paused like he'd never considered it. She's a brat, messy, thick-skinned, but she's also naive, kind, pretty, and young. So what's a girl like her doing with someone like me? The question crushed him in the silence of his apartment. He was falling for her, and the terror of that was worse than any bad luck he'd ever had. The night only grew darker around him. Haenyoung ran into them on the street and asked who the girl was. Jeeple panicked. Plan A, introduce her as a relative. One glance and Haenyoung wasn't buying it. They don't look alike at all. So Jeeple went nuclear. This is my girlfriend. Haenyoung's eyes welled up with tears of joy, too moved by Jeeple's fresh start to ask hard questions. The lie worked because Haenyoung wanted to believe it so badly. The interrogation began over dinner. How long? How'd you meet? First impressions. Jeeple spun an elaborate story about a blind date through a friend's relative's second cousin. Myo-hyun finally slammed the table and told him to stop. He was overdoing it. He told Haenyoung he was exhausted and heading to dinner. Myo-hyun invited Haenyoung along before Jeeple could stop her. He squeezed her head in warning, but it was too late. That's how the three of them started eating together. Haenyoung shared stories over sizzling meat. Jeeple wanted to be a writer his whole life, and when it finally worked out, his wife was already gone. He gave up on himself after that, never dated anyone since. Now I know why, Haenyoung grinned. He was waiting for someone like you. Haenyoung asked if Myo-hyun had friends who worked part-time jobs, because a place he knew needed someone. Myo-hyun paused. Friends? For the first time, the loneliness of her situation was visible. 2 hours of drunk rambling later, Myo-hyun was completely drained. Haenyoung wouldn't stop talking about Jeeple's hard times while his other friend snored beside him. So tiring, she thought, and honestly, fair. Haenyoung told a story about Jeeple once holding something in, then standing up and just leaving. Myo-hyun gasped while Haenyoung cackled. Somewhere in that shared laughter, something between them shifted. Jeeple was running through the streets, panting, chasing after someone. Myo-hyun sat alone on a bench, tapping a phone with tears in her eyes. Again, why am I taking this so hard? She offered to lick his wound with total cat-like sincerity, and he said yes before his brain caught up. Then she pulled back. No, This isn't what I wanted. The vulnerability split the moment open, and the gap between what they needed had never felt wider. Myo-hyun studied Jipil and made her call. He's either a doormat or has ulterior motives. Days passed in their strange orbit until she told him to make that person stop coming. But a few days later, something snapped. The sound of Jipil losing all reason. Myo-hyun's father sat her down and told her the truth about her mother. She was smart, competent, always listened to her parents, and the first choice she ever made on her own was marrying him. But he wasn't a cat person, he was human, and that changed everything. Everyone tried to stop the marriage, but her mother insisted. That's how Myo-hyun was born, frail, constantly sick, too many near-death experiences as a child. They eventually learned it was because her dad wasn't a cat person. Her mother started believing the marriage was a mistake. Her father recounted how her mom would apologize to baby Myo-hyun, crying and saying she was sorry. Myo-hyun scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. All you did was cover for mom. Like mother, like daughter." Her father sighed. "This won't do. He needed to do something." He told Myo-hyun her mother went around apologizing everywhere after she ran away. There aren't many cat people left, so finding a suitor took serious effort. She pulled every string she had, and Myo-hyun's response was the same stubborn refusal. "I'm not going on that blind date." Enter Won Gyun-woo, late 20s, male, probably Abyssinian. His face, name, and personality all screamed dog person, but he was actually a cat. He'd met Myo-hyun once, and his only thought was, who is this brat? He asked about her partner, and whether he seemed nice enough. Myo-hyun was on a video call fighting back. "How I handle it is none of your business. I can take care of myself." The whole apartment was smaller than her old bedroom, and the man next to her wasn't exactly what her family had in mind. She flinched as the phone was snatched away mid-sentence. Her brother told her everything has consequences, but Myo-hyun wasn't budging. She had her first job here. She was happier than in that greenhouse. She didn't want to live the way her parents did. The call ended, and the weight of her choice settled over the room. Gyun-woo told her she was still irresponsible and immature, and surely there was only one thing she could do right now. Myo-hyun blurted out an apology and said she'd go through with the marriage. Jipil sat there fidgeting, and Myo-hyun quietly added, "I don't want to go back." Her family's mansion erupted with wailing, Myo-hyun's mother screaming about who she takes after. Her father tried to calm things down, suggesting they at least hear her out. Her mother snapped back. Hear her out for what? She practically eloped with that guy. Still just a kid, they sighed. Myo-hyun's brother pushed her. "Get out there. Go tell him." She stammered that she really couldn't say something like that she was in no place to burden him. He handed her a recipe book their mom sent and told her to take it before their mother lost more years off her life. Myo-hyun came back to the apartment, and something between them had shifted. She noticed she'd been acting different. She asked herself why she felt so antsy when she didn't think she'd done anything wrong. He was acting cold and distant, and the anxiety was eating her alive. Jipil clicked off the light. "Lie down, we're going to bed." She said okay, but her chest felt heavy. The silence between them in that dark room was louder than any fight they'd ever had. Someone asked, "Who?" "Yang Myo-hyun and Kwon Jipil." "When?" "About half a year after they met." "Where?" "The convenience store near their place." The narration set the stage like a crime report, and what came next would change everything. Jipil told Myo-hyun they were out of beer. She said she told him so, and suggested they just go buy more. He groaned. He thought he'd finally get to relax. She pushed him to go, and he said he just didn't feel like going out today. "I like you." The words dropped like a bomb in the middle of their mundane argument about beer. Myo-hyun's ears twitched and the room went completely still. 3 words that rewrote every rule, every agreement, every wall he'd built. He kissed her, hard, messy, desperate. She stumbled and he caught her, asking if she was all right. She said she was fine. It didn't hurt. Then she whispered, "No, actually, I don't know why I'm acting like this." She told him if he taught her, she'd try to learn. "So don't be so cold." He grabbed her face and kissed her again, softer this time. "It's nothing," he said. "It's just jealousy. I was being jealous. That's why he'd been acting like that." Myo-hyun sat in the dark apartment feeling the weight of what just happened. He was acting so different and she couldn't help but be anxious. "My chest feels heavy," she thought, not understanding the shape of what was growing inside her. Back at her family's place, someone told her she'd never been like this. "Is it because of that guy?" "Don't badmouth him," she hissed. "Fine," they said. "Go check for yourself. See if you're right or not." She transformed and dashed out the door. Jipil was standing in the apartment when something crashed through the entrance. Myo-hyun had come back, slamming into him, nuzzling against him before he could even say her name. "Is this a dream?" he whispered. She was back, and neither of them was letting go this time.